Oftentimes, important events in history are called revolutions, such as the Scientific Revolution or the Glorious Revolution. Although these events were called revolutions, many would categorize these very differently. Unlike these so-called revolutions, the French Revolution defines the term in the best way, including fast, irreversible changes in both politics and society that went against the previous French traditions. The effects of the revolution include the removal of the feudal class system, the transition from a monarchy to a republic, and an attempt to change French culture by separating itself from the Catholic Church. All of these effects help categorize the French Revolution as a true revolution. First, a major effect of the revolution was the removal of their structure of classes. Before the revolution, France followed the traditional class structure of the Ancien regime. The first and second estate were made up of the clergy and the nobles. Combined, they made up less than 5% of the population and were all exempt from paying taxes. The third estate was made up of everyone else, including the artisans, peasants, and the middle class, also known as the bourgeoisie. And unlike the nobles or the clergy, they had to pay many different types of taxes, many of which were paying for the expenses of the first and second estates. After the meetings of the Estates General, the Third Estate renamed themselves as the National Assembly, whose goal was to create a new constitution for France. After many food riots had caused much chaos, both in the cities and then by peasants in the Great Fear, all of the social orders knew something needed to be done to stop the rebellion. On August 4, 1789, the National Assembly abolished feudalism and got both the clergy and the nobles to agree to give up their privileges that they previously possessed. After this, the old regime no longer existed, and France would no longer have a state in which people would gain privileges based on their nobility or association with the church. Second, the revolution moved France away from the idea of an absolute monarchy to one with a constitution and eventually to a republic. In the later half of the 18th century, France found itself in much debt. This caused the reluctant King of France, Louis XVI, to call the Estates General to help get them out of their financial crisis. Yet the meeting resulted in even more conflict, with the Third Estate transforming into a National Assembly. Louis then refused to recognize the National Assembly because of their beliefs to make a constitution and government of the people rather than a monarchy, but Louis would accept becoming a constitutional monarch. As bread prices continued rising, the people were getting more upset with the king. This led to the violent Women's March that forced the royal family to move from Versailles back to Paris. After the violent acts shown through the march, the king was concerned for both his family's safety and for his power. The royal family then made an attempt to escape France in their flight to Varennes. When Louis XVI returned, he still preserved his throne and accepted the written constitution that created the Legislative Assembly, but from this point on the monarchy was doomed. Despite attempts by the Holy Roman Empire and Prussia to protect France from the revolution through the Declaration of Pillnitz and the Brunswick Manifesto, the revolution had already spun out of control, and by August 10, 1972, the king was taken as prisoner, tried for treason, and eventually executed by the guillotine. On August 21, 1792, France would proclaim its first republic, meaning the monarchy in France was now over. Lastly, the culture in France became much more distant from its previous religious influences. At the start of the Revolution, almost all of France was Catholic. Through the drafting of the civil constitution of the clergy, the National Assembly led by Robespierre showed their new control over the church. Many of the clergy refused to accept the constitution and blamed their decline of power on the revolution. This provided a basis for the counter-revolutionary cause, and after the events of the September massacres, it would show that both the church and the current republic couldn't coexist. During the Reign of Terror, the National Convention, which was the government under the Republic, considered Catholicism as having values that went against those of the Republic, and because of this needed to be stopped. As a result of this, de-Christianization emerged. All elements of the Catholic religion were taken out of society. Priests were arrested for doing their jobs, and public worship was no longer allowed. Churches were closed, streets were renamed, and a new calendar with its months based off of the seasons and consisting of 10-day weeks was created. Religion ceased to exist during this time of the Reign of Terror in order to protect the ideals of the Republic, but eventually religion slowly returned back into the French culture after Robespierre's death. Since all of these rapid irreversible changes took place, the French Revolution can be considered as a true revolution.